So I'm Chuck D'Antonio. I lead the solution engineering team here at Replicated, and what we do is we help customers who either have some software that they've been running for their customers in a SaaS model or something like that, and have customer demands for the customers to manage it themselves, or software vendors who've been delivering to their customer environments who are modernizing their applications and wanting to take advantage of Kubernetes when they do that. And they look and they're like, well, how are we going to manage all this Kubernetes related stuff for distribution entitlement, making sure there's a cluster, making sure that cluster can run our stuff. So we help with all of that, all of those challenges, and my team is engaged with our customers from when we first start talking to them about whether Replicated works for them, all the way through to when they're seeing more and more and more of their customers use their software in the environments that we allow them to get into. And we got started with Instruct earlier this year. We were looking for a way to both save a little money on what we were doing with teaching our software vendors that we work with as our customers how to use our platform, and also to give them a little bit more of a chance to do self-service. You know, one of the things that made it sort of costly for us to do it the way we did it before is we've got to set up a lot of stuff, right? You've got to have a Kubernetes cluster to install in, because that's what we're doing with folks. You've got to have a shelled environment to work in, and we want to teach them as many features as we can, right? And when you think about it, if you think of all the things that have to happen, if you want to take your Kubernetes application and run it on your customer's environment, like, you've got a lot of different things you have to look after, and a lot of things you want to understand about the cluster before you install, a lot of things you want to know about the cluster when it's running your software. So we have a ton of features because of that. And we wanted to be able to showcase individual features in like really easy to get at chunks. Yep. And so doing that the way we were doing it before, we would have to set up infrastructure and leave it running for weeks, right? Because you never know when someone can get in there and try what you're trying to get them to try.
Right.
So with Instruct, we can set that up front and just sort of specify the automation with Instruct, and then they come in and they're like, we want to try generating a support bundle in our customer's air-gapped cluster. And we can set up an Instruct track for that, and they come in and they generate that support bundle. Instruct helps us get set up with that cluster running behind a soft air gap, right? We just network rules, but it helps us get that cluster set up. It helps us give them a shell to connect to it. And so instead of having to keep that running for 2-3 weeks for every person who wants to try this feature, before I would have had to run 3 VMs for 2 weeks. That was sort of our default length.
Right.
Now I run, through Instruct, I'm running 2 sandboxes for 45 minutes. And so that is, the cost savings of that, the administrative overhead, like drop in administrative overhead of that, like it's just been fantastic for us so far. So I just heard, actually, we did a big group last week, one of our existing customers who's now actually gone through it both ways, the way we did it before and the way we did it with Instruct.
Okay.
And they were like, this was so smooth, it was so great, everyone enjoyed the experience, thank you so much. That was the first feedback right out of the gate too, so it was a big group, first time we tried it with a big group, and a little bit of nerves because it was the first time with a big group, and great feedback right out of the gate. So we're using our tracks actually earlier in our sales process. So generally what we'll do is, if you think of when you're approaching one of your customers, right? You start with some early stuff, trying to understand what they're doing, and all that early discovery. Then they always want to see a demo. You show them the demo, and then they want to see how it works. Well, before what we did was just start out on a proof of value, proof of concept, and start building up stuff with them on their stuff. Now what we do is we set up an invite for them. We lock it down to just their email addresses, so we know who's coming in is those people. It gives them some privacy too, because now people aren't just finding a link and knowing that we're working with them, right? And then they can run through the features that they're most interested in, and then we can focus that proof of value on things that are unique to their application and ways they might apply those features. Instead of before, where it was like, well, we're going to use the proof of value to learn stuff, we're going to use the proof of value to test stuff, we're going to use proof of value for stuff we might use later, but now it's the stuff they might use later, or the stuff that just is learning and very easy to apply to their application. Instruct takes care of all of that. And then it's just like, something very specific that we end up doing in the proof of value. So not only are we getting benefits in terms of like how people go through and use the platform, but we're getting benefits later in the process because we're not spending the same amount of time on those proof of values. We're answering very specific questions. Absolutely, we're getting a little more educated user. We actually are changing our sales process to insert a stage that's basically while we're working in, with Instruct, with our customers.
So what does that look like, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so it's basically, before we went basically from discovery to a little bit of education to the proof of value. Now we put something between the education and the proof of value that we call Align. And Align is about aligning their understanding of the technology through using, we call them our labs, our hands-on labs, our field labs, depending on what we're talking about, our labs, which each lab is an Instruct track. I am hearing a little bit of feedback around that, but the other feedback I'm hearing is different corners of the organization saying, could we apply that to what I do? So can we put some, can we embed some stuff on the website? The docs team is saying, hey, we have tutorials in the docs. Can we, we'll still probably have the text of the original tutorial there because some people are just going to want to try it their own way, but can we say, hey, want to do this in a quick way?
Yeah.
Here, go over there and here's this tutorial in
like
Instruct.
Support enablement almost.
Support enablement, learning, yeah, it's like, it's all, it's coming from all different corners of the organization about like how powerful this is going to be for us and has been for us so far. We've even just started experimenting with it. Now they can take a look, learn on their own, and we've got it feeding back into Salesforce. Okay. So we know when everybody starts a track, when everybody ends a track. We're generating new contacts in Salesforce that, what was an interesting thing that we hadn't occurred to us is that a lot of the folks that we engage with hands-on are not the people that we've been talking to as like the primary contacts in the process.
Right.
And now we're getting to know who those people are and what they're interested in and how they're working with, how they're going to be working with Replicated.
Right.
So just another layer of insight that we didn't have before. If you think the way we did it before, it was, not fully active time, but it was like 3 or 4 hours to set up all the VMs if 4 or 5 people from the customer wanted to try something out.
Yeah.
And so you'd have those 3 or 4 hours, and invariably it's the end of the day because you're going to be waiting for it.
Right.
And then you'd find out, a week and a half later that we had to sort of guess whether people had been doing anything or not.
Right.
And we had ways that we could look at like, well, we asked them to like update this thing and it looks like they did, and it was it was all sort of weird hand wavy stuff.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't really know. And so we didn't spend the 4 hours setting up, we didn't spend the time spelunking around our admin console to see if they had done some things.
Yeah.
We just saw a Slack channel like light up with activity. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I have a small team, and anyone watching who's a sales engineer knows we have the most valuable time in the organization.
Absolutely.
And now I can figure out how best to use that time.
Yeah.
Because, setting up sandbox environments and, checking random things to guess if someone is using them and shutting them down so that we're not, spending a lot of time on the cloud and then like coaxing people along that maybe aren't ready.
Right.
That's a lot of time spent that isn't working with the folks who are super excited.
Yeah.
Now I see those signals of the excitement and I can say, all right, Josh, Fernando, like, go jump on this.
It's time to engage.
Yeah. So it's perfect.
Awesome.